Hi all, DT Neil here, talking about assorted writerly things, storytelling, genre, fantasy, horror, science fiction. And in this moment, Cyberpunk, yet again. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Ship of Theseus, aka Theseus's paradox, but I feel there's a relevance there vis-a-vis Cyberpunk. The essence of that paradox is the idea of if you take an object and over time you replace all of the existing or old parts with something new, is that thing the same after it's over time been swapped out? And the example is, again, this idea of a ship. And over time, a ship gets replacement. Old things break down, they replace it, until at the end of the cycle, you've got something that's completely made of replacement parts. Still a ship, but is it the same ship that it was at the outset? And you can see it doesn't take much imagination to jump into the realm of body augmentation and cybernetics in a cyberpunk environment. You can take an existing character or person, and let's just say you get a new cyber arm because you needed it, and then the other arm, and then legs, and then lungs, and then brain modifications, and then a chassis, a torso, thoracic improvements. And in the Edge Runners animated show, they really explored that in a way, as you saw David's character go from fresh-faced newbie to a cybered up being, almost a true cyborg. And it raises interesting questions from philosophical perspectives. How much of you can you afford to lose? And the Faustian bargain in a cyberpunk world is that idea that you can, for the right price, you can get all those new things, And with the hustler's life that one leads in a cyberpunk world for the runner types, they trade themselves, the flesh and blood gets traded for chrome, for cybernetic modifications, upgrades. And it's an interesting philosophical concept. So, the Ship of Theseus, that's an old paradox, and there are a number of resolutions to it. But it's interesting to think about that in the context of cyberpunk and what that really means for the identity of a character. What is the core essence of who you are? Now, I think in many ways one could view our brains as the root of what we are, because if you take the brain away, we're just a body, right? Without that brain, and I'm not even going into any idea of souls or spirits or anything like that. I'm just saying at the very core level, there's the brain, which is the root of, that the mapping of your brain is who you ultimately are. And excuse me, in a cyberpunk universe where the technology allows for brain modifications and, in some extreme cases, digitizing of your brain and so you can have a virtual version of yourself that's been fully done. Is that you? Is that the same? If you're looking at a digitized version of yourself, is that you? Now, obviously, on the face of it, you say, well, no, it's not, because I had, a biological origin. I didn't begin as a digitized copy of myself. But it points to some of the ways I think cyberpunk is still relevant conceptually, even though we aren't quite yet at that technological level where one could do a one-to-one switch over from a flesh and blood person to a digitized entity. It's interesting. And other cyberpunk writers in the decades past have done work on that and articulated that. But the fact that it still endures is interesting from my perspective. In my Sightseer novel, which comes out May 27th, as you've no doubt seen before when I posted it, the lead character, Cam, has gotten his eyes replaced. This is, and in the context of the story, it's not his first replacement. He's actually looking for upgrades. He's getting improved eyes because he wants to be more relevant in the market for what he does as a looker, which is essentially a professional eyewitness, or a cyber eyewitness, if you will. And so he's just getting upgrades because he wants to remain competitive. So for him, he's already made that leap. At some point, he decided to trade out his original eyes for cyber eyes. And in the way I have that framed in the story is, of course, there's a, it's not just the eyes. There's kind of there's effectively a housing, cosmetically appropriate, so it doesn't look like some ghastly apparition. There's attention paid to that, but when push comes to shove, he's not using his original eyes. Now that's his prime modification. He has, of course, data jacks and things for in his head, but he's not fully cybered. Otherwise, he's flesh and blood. He's got some headwear, and he's got his artificial eyes. But it's interesting to see the prime antagonist for him in that story is Stabbo the Cyber Clown, who is really, by any measure, a monster. He is heavily, heavily modded from head to toe. And that journey, so for me, they represent a study of contrast. The one who's lightly cybered versus the one who is completely cybered. And it's funny to think about, though, the Ship of Theseus in that fashion. Like, how much of yourself can you trade out while still remaining who you are, whatever that is. And that's not a main theme of the story of Sightseer. It's not, but it's certainly in the background, because you can't do any kind of cyberpunk story without body modification, without cybernetics, without that chrome coming into play. And it's certainly going to be represented in books 2 and 3 of the Plastic Fantastic, which is the trilogy that Sightseer is the first of. So it's an interesting concept for me. I find it intriguing, so I will certainly be exploring it. And I don't really have answers for it, how people operate with that knowledge, that awareness of over time trading out everything that they came with, in their biological origins into something cybernetic, and how that person would react. Are they detached from the world? Do they miss their original selves? Are they somewhere between those two poles? There's good stuff for that. And I think Cyberpunk is uniquely equipped for that, because so much of the conventional science fiction is all in those external things, spaceships and planets and colonization and colonies and exploration. But Cyberpunk keeps it very personal, very, the person you're looking at in the mirror, like that idea of, well, who the hell am I? And whether all that cyber, all that chrome, whether that enhances who you are or diminishes who you are. So I think there are good things to explore in that within Cyberpunk. And for people who are intrigued by that, I think that genre offers real opportunities for what it really means to be human in the face of a world of rampant consumer technology available, for the right price for people.